Hi, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Expose Nature keyboard that I bought recently. I haven't seen that many reviews for this online, and I'm probably going to be coming at this from a slightly different angle from most people anyway, since I'm not looking for a gaming keyboard. I'm looking for something that's going to serve me well for programming under Linux. So if listening to me witter on about keyboards for 10 minutes sounds like your idea of a good time, probably time to reevaluate certain life choices. But nonetheless, here we go. So yeah, for a while I've been using a Microsoft Comfort Curve 2000 keyboard. Now the reason for that is just that it has a nice gentle curve to it, and I find that it's easy with normal keyboards to end up with your wrists bent like that, and I found out the hard way over the years that it's much better for me to keep my wrists straight when I'm typing, and the curve on the Comfort Curve 2000 keyboard certainly aids in that. But it's only a cheap rubber dome membrane type keyboard, so A, it's wearing out, B, I'm looking for something better. And when I was looking around for something better, I realised that my choices are actually quite limited, certainly if I don't want to be spending a fortune. And while I was looking, I came across this, the Expose keyboards, and thought, aha, that looks perfect. Well, no, it's not perfect, but it is good, so I'll tell you a little bit about it now. So the keyboard itself is, what, a 10 keyless layout, I guess. There's no numeric keypad, but there are nav keys, albeit not a full nav cluster. Reasonably well made. It's the cheaper of the two models available. The other one, the Knight, is heavier. I think it's basically a case of more metal, less plastic, more expensive. It has an optional numeric keypad as well, which I think it connects magnetically to the side, but that's not the case for this one. As far as build quality goes, this is pretty good. I mean, it's not bad at all. The one thing I will say is that when I first got it out the box and placed it on a table, I found there was a little bit of rocking from corner to corner. Funnily enough, that doesn't seem to be happening anymore. I don't know whether the rubber feet have just compressed a little bit and bedded themselves in or what, but it's no longer a problem, but I was a little bit taken aback to find that was a problem when it first came out of the box. But anyhow, all's well that ends well in that kind of thing, I guess. So yeah, as I say, it's a 10 keyless layout. As you can see, it's the ergonomic design, which again aids in keeping those wrists nice and straight. Everything about it is designed to minimise the amount of movement you have to make while typing, so that's the point of the ortholinear layout here, the idea being that your fingers bend and stretch in a straight line, so the keys may as well follow that. I think the staggered design that we're all more used to is basically a hang-up of the mechanical typewriter days. I should imagine the staggering of the keys was simply to allow the trackers that connected the keys to the type bars to pass each other, so it was an engineering thing more than an ergonomic thing when that was designed. And then because it became a standard, we all stuck with it and carried on doing it that way because we'd already always been doing it that way long after the reason for it had gone. So yeah. The layout is ANSI, so we've got US layout. Enter key is the wide type there with a backslash above it. To be honest, I wish the backslash was down here, I really do, but that's just me. And ultimately I've got to be doing some relearning for this anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much if I'm relearning to a completely different layout, so yeah, that works. The switches themselves on here are Gateron optical switches. I had several different types I could have chosen from. I think the options were brown, red, black or blue. Brown being tactile, red being a light linear, black being a heavier linear, and then blue being clicky. Now, some years ago I came across an IBM Model M keyboard in a charity shop which I bought on the spot, and I loved that, needless to say. I don't use it as a daily driver because once again it doesn't solve the wrist bending problem. but I do like the keys on it, being an old-fashioned clicky keyboard. So when I was deciding which type of keys to have for this keyboard, I chose the blue ones. Since they're clicky, I figured they'd probably feel the most like the ones on the IBM Model M. As it turns out, most like is probably... It's more a case really of least unlike, I suppose, than most like, because they're not actually that similar, but they are undeniably clicky. So yeah, sound-wise, yeah, I don't mind them. They're not objectionable. I mean, they're arguably a little bit high-pitched. The one thing I will say sound-wise is that these larger keys here do sound completely different from their neighbours. So if you're fussy about sound, that might be an issue for you. So yeah, that's I can live with that. So as far as the layout goes, yeah, as I say, it's not ideal for me as a programmer. I find that the one thing I miss most of all are the home and end keys. Because I do have a habit when I'm programming of holding down shift and then using home and end to highlight a portion of a line, and if I'm about to delete it or overtype it. However, there are ways you can deal with the fact that some keys are missing. This keyboard supports 4 layers. If you're not familiar with how layers work in keyboards, it's basically a way of saying different types of layout. The first of them is called the driver layer, and in that mode basically what each key does is determined by the software running on the computer. In the other 3 layers, the keyboard's in charge of everything. Well, that's a good thing, because when the keyboard was first funded, I think it was a crowd-funded thing. I don't think it was on Kickstarter, I think it was on Indiegogo, but it was long before it came onto my radar anyway. But when it was crowd-funded, there was supposed to be Linux and Mac software coming out for it, and also international layouts, but none of that ever happened, and I have no particular reason to expect it ever will at this stage. But what it does mean is that you can't use the driver layer if you're on Linux or Mac. But you can use the other layers. So this is the layer I use. I don't use the lighting because I'm not interested in that. But what I've done to make my life easier as a programmer, I never use caps lock. So I've set it up so that if I press caps lock we switch to another layer, at which point the I, J, K and L keys become cursor keys, U becomes home and O becomes end. Which means that, well, that makes my life easier. And it's at this point that I hit a flaw in the firmware, which is that qualifier keys don't transfer between layers. So what that means is that if you hold down shift, if you're going to highlight a line, you'd expect to hold down shift and then press home or end to highlight either the first half or the second half of the line. But if you do that using the caps lock key to switch layers, if you press shift, when you press caps lock the shift is lost, which is really annoying. So it means that if I do shift, caps lock and then U or O, I will end up either at the beginning or the end of the line with nothing highlighted. If instead I press caps lock first and then press shift, which is a really awkward thing to do, then U and O, then that works fine. That does what I want it to do, but it is awkward. Oh, okay. It's, Windows thought I was trying to turn on sticky keys. Another example of me not being familiar with Windows, I guess. Anyway, where was I? Yes, the issue I have with qualifiers not transferring between layers, yes. The other thing I found, it would be really nice if the firmware supported mod tap, and it doesn't. So what I would love to be able to do is take the backslash key and map it to the left shift, so that if I tap left shift I get backslash, if I hold it I get shift. That is apparently a fairly common feature in mechanical keyboards, and it's not present on this one, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, apart from that, it works out pretty well. The FN key, if you hold that, you can then use those 2 keys as volume up and down. There are other media functions there. Those 4 keys control the lighting, and then those 4 keys switch between the various layers. So yeah, that works quite nicely. So yeah, that's the keyboard itself, but the other part of the equation is software. Now, as I say, there was supposed to be Linux and Mac software, but that never materialised, which means that if you want to customise the keyboard, customise the layers, then you do need access to a Windows box. Luckily, I'm the kind of person who has spare computers lying around, and this one is running Windows 10 because I used it as a dummy run for upgrading a machine that actually mattered to Windows 10 a while back. I wanted to make sure that it actually worked before I did it on anything important. So yeah, I've got Windows 10 on this box. When I run the software, it says no device, which is not uncommon. So if I replug the keyboard, there we are, up and running. Now, what can I say about this software? I've always tried to live by the principle that if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, and I am going to have to break that rule here, I'm afraid. So yeah, we've got the, well, up here with the close gadget and minimise gadget, we've got a t-shirt icon, which is intriguing, and that allows me to pick from half a dozen different background graphics, which is very pretty, and that's about the only positive thing I can really say about this software. In every other respect, I just get the impression, I've always liked that expression that you can't polish a turd, and I can't shake the feeling that the designers of this software were doing their best to disprove that theory. So yeah, as I say, driver layer I can't use in Linux or Mac, custom layers I can, so that's what we're going to be interested in here. We can choose between our 3 layers there. At each point on each layer we've got, well, the keys can be redefined. You click on them and then you click on what you want, which key you want them to behave as in this keyboard underneath here. You can also pick from one of these other tabs, numeric keypad, media functions, mouse functions, system and net functions, including calculator, which I do use, so that's quite handy. What I've done with that, is put it on layer 3 on the plus key. So on layer 1 I've got both the caps lock key and the print screen key in the opposite corner are set so that if you press those you end up on layer 3 momentarily, and then on layer 3 I've got the alternative functions set up, including, as I say, the calculator, so that works quite nicely for me. So if I then just press print screen and plus, up pops the calculator. Yeah, that works quite well. What is confusing, however, is on layer 1, if you click either caps lock or whatever of those, if you want to assign a different layer to a key, you actually have to press this FNX button down here, which is really illogical. I don't know why they didn't put that up here with these. That would have been a much more sensible place for it. Or simply, once you've, I don't know, overload those buttons somehow, I don't know, but it took me ages to figure out that that's where I needed to go to change layer on a key. So yeah, it's, as I say, somewhat illogical there. The other issue with this software is if you want to remove an assignment on a key, you've got to hover the mouse over it and then move the cursor very carefully into this speech bubble thing that appears. And then there's a little trash can icon, which I very much doubt you can see on the video because someone decided mid-grey on orange would be a good colour scheme for it. It's really not. So yeah, that's how you remove an assignment, but getting into that speech bubble is quite tricky. If your aim isn't good, or if you overshoot, the speech bubble will disappear. So yeah, that can be an exercise in frustration. So yeah, that's the key layout itself. There is a macro function as well, which I must admit I haven't used. as I understand it, you can have quite complicated macros in the driver layer and much simpler macros in the inbuilt firmware layers, which makes sense. I mean, there's going to be limited storage in the keyboard itself. You can also set up lighting, but again, that's a bit on the confusing side. We've got a flashlight button there which lists light patterns, and I'm not entirely sure how that's supposed to work, because there's also a lighting tab here which lists the same patterns. So I think it's something to do with a global pattern for the layer versus what happens when you press a particular key. And then the patterns themselves you can define or choose from on this DIY Lights tab here. Now, as you've probably guessed, I'm not remotely interested in the RGB lighting for aesthetic reasons, but there are practical reasons for it as well. For instance, what I've got set up is so that when you switch to layer 3 with the caps lock or print screen key, it will basically light up whichever keys have changed. So I set that up using this system. I've got the keys I want to change highlighted, and I've got them all set to yellow. I must be doing something basic wrong, because when I apply that to the keyboard, the right keys light up, but they resolutely light up in purple, not yellow. As I say, it's probably me doing something silly, or the extremely illogical software not directing me to the right option at all. But anyway, it actually lights up the right keys, so I'll take that. That's good enough. So yeah, that's the software. It's a little bit underwhelming. It's looks quite nice, but lacking in functionality and not very well designed. The firmware works well enough, but there are a couple of rough edges. It's a shame that it doesn't support mod tap. It's a shame that qualifiers are lost when you switch layers. But all those issues, they're paper cuts, not deal breakers. So all really that's left to talk about now is the price, and frankly, given that it's a mechanical keyboard and given that it's an ergonomic keyboard, and at the time I ordered it the price on the website was reduced and there was free shipping, I consider it pretty good value for what it is. So yeah, I'm happy enough with it. I didn't spend the extra on the more expensive cousin, because really this is a toe in the water for mechanical keyboards for me. It's I wasn't going to spend a huge amount in the first instance, so yeah, I'm pleased with what I've bought. I think I got value for money, so yeah, thumbs up. I like it. Thanks for watching.